December 16th, 1773. Boston Harbor holds its breath as 3 ships float like wooden coffins in the moonlight. Tonight, a simple beverage will ignite the flames that birth a nation. For centuries, tea was ritual and comfort until it became a tool of empire. In British hands, it transformed into something bitter, silent, and more powerful than gunpowder. You sip your morning cup, unaware that this simple ritual once held the power to topple kings. Tonight, we return to when tea leaves became the seeds of revolution. Samuel Adams paces his modest home, candlelight dancing across weathered maps. Outside, British soldiers patrol cobblestone streets. Inside, a man plots the empire's downfall, one cup at a time. The East India Company, a corporation so powerful it controlled nations, commanded armies, and ruled over 200 million souls. Tea was their golden thread, binding the world in chains. But empires, like teacups, are fragile things. One careless move, one moment of overreach, and centuries of power can shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Thomas Hutchinson, Royal Governor of Massachusetts, stands before his mirror each morning, adjusting his wig like a crown. He believes he serves the greatest empire on earth. 10,000 miles away, in villages you'll never pronounce, Indian workers pick tea leaves under scorching sun. Their sweat sweetens British cups while their children starve. The Tea Act of 1773 wasn't about tea. It was about control. Parliament's message was clear. You will buy our product from our company at our price. Resistance is futile. In Boston's taverns, merchants whisper like conspirators. John Hancock traces nervous patterns on wooden tables, calculating how much gold Parliament's greed will steal from his pockets. The ships arrive like harbingers of war. Dartmouth, Eleanor, Beaver, their holds stuffed with 342 chests of East India Company tea, each one a small coffin for colonial freedom. Captain Francis Roch commands the Dartmouth, unaware he's sailing into history's crosshairs. Good men often become pawns in games they never chose to play, carrying cargo heavier than gold. November becomes December. The ships sit anchored like prisoners in the harbor, their tea growing cold while 2 worlds prepare for war. Time ticks toward revolution with mechanical precision. Samuel Adams knows that some battles are won not with muskets, but with theater. Tonight, he will stage the greatest performance in American history, and Britain will applaud their own destruction. December 16th, Old South Meeting House fills with 7,000 bodies pressed together like kindling. Outside, British sentries pace. Inside, revolution finds its voice through democratic thunder and righteous fury. Gentlemen, this meeting can do nothing more to save the country. Adams' words hang in winter air like smoke. History pivots on 16 syllables spoken quietly by a man. The transformation begins at Griffin's Wharf. Ordinary men shed their colonial skins, painting faces red and black, becoming Mohawk warriors for one night. Identity dissolves into rebellion like sugar. George Robert Twelves Hughes, a poor shoemaker, tonight becomes a warrior. In darkness, class disappears. Rich and poor stand equal, united by tea leaves and the dream of freedom. They march through Boston streets like ghosts of America's future, moccasins silent on frozen cobblestones. Behind painted faces, lawyers and laborers breathe the same cold air of rebellion. The harbor waits. 3 ships float like coffins in black water, their masts reaching toward stars that will soon witness the birth of a nation built on defiance. Captain Roch watches from his cabin as painted figures board his ship. He could resist, call for British soldiers. Instead, he chooses silence, becoming history's reluctant midwife to revolution. The first chest splits open like a wooden heart, spilling tea into Boston Harbor. Brown leaves float on black water like the scattered dreams of an empire that forgot. In just 3 hours, 342 chests of tea were destroyed. Not a single leaf stolen, no one arrested, nothing burned. The tide quietly carried away every trace of rebellion. Young Joshua Wyeth sweeps spilled tea from the ship's deck into the harbor. Even in rebellion, he refuses to steal. Some principles survive even the death of empires. Admiral John Montague watches from his window as Boston Harbor turns brown. He commands the British fleet, but tonight, 150 painted rebels command both sea and shame. The disguised rebels march home through silent streets, leaving footprints in snow like breadcrumbs leading to revolution. Behind them, harbor water tastes of freedom and empire's death. King George III receives word in his golden palace. A cup of tea has been spilled 3,000 miles away. He cannot know this small stain will drown his empire. Parliament's response is swift and merciless. The coercive acts. Boston's throat will be squeezed until the rebellious city begs for forgiveness and pays for every floating leaf with gold. But empires often plant the seeds of their own destruction. Each punitive law pushes 13 colonies closer together, like fingers curling into a fist that will soon strike. In Philadelphia, delegates gather like storm clouds. The Continental Congress convenes not to plan rebellion, but to coordinate it. Tea leaves have grown into the tree of revolution. Paul Revere rides through New England nights, his horse's hooves beating rhythm of resistance on frozen ground. One man's midnight journey spreads rebellion like wildfire through winter. Benjamin Franklin sits in London drawing rooms watching British aristocrats sip tea while discussing how to punish Americans. He smiles politely, but inside, his allegiance dies with dignity. April 1775, Lexington Green. British soldiers march to seize colonial weapons, unaware they're walking into the mouth of revolution. Some mornings change the world before breakfast. Captain John Parker faces 700 British soldiers with 77 colonial farmers. Stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean war, let it begin here. The shot heard round the world shatters morning silence. No one knows who fired first. History doesn't care. Revolution has found its voice, and empires will tremble. Tea leaves scattered in Boston Harbor 18 months ago have grown into corpses on New England grass. Small acts of defiance become large acts of war. Thomas Gage, British commander in Boston, writes dispatches to London. How does he explain that farmers defeated professional soldiers? Some defeats cannot be described, only endured. From Lexington to Concord, British soldiers retreat like red ants fleeing fire. Behind every tree, every stone wall, colonial muskets wait. The empire bleeds on country roads. In Virginia, George Washington tends his gardens, unaware that Congress will soon call him to lead a war he never wanted. Destiny finds men in quiet moments. July 4th, 1776. Philadelphia's Independence Hall witnesses the birth of a nation built on an idea that governments derive power from the consent of the governed, not from tea. John Hancock signs his name large enough for King George to read without spectacles. Some signatures are acts of war, written in ink that might as well be blood. The declaration travels from Philadelphia like gospel, carried by riders through 13 colonies. Each reading transforms British subjects into Americans word by word, oath by sacred oath. Declarations alone mean nothing. Only sweat, blood, and sacrifice can make them real. The words must be backed by courage in the field, or they vanish like ink in rain. Across the Atlantic, King George declares American rebels traitors. He cannot comprehend that empires die not from external conquest, but from internal rebellion against the idea of empire. French ships appear on American horizons like answered prayers. King Louis XVI, ancient enemy of Britain, smiles as he pours gold into American coffers in Britain's grave. Benjamin Franklin charms French aristocrats in Versailles salons, playing the simple American philosopher while negotiating the death of the British Empire with wit, wine, and cunning diplomacy. October 1781. Yorktown, Virginia. British General Cornwallis watches French ships blockade his escape while Washington's artillery pounds his fortifications into dust and British pride into memory. The British band plays "The World Turned Upside Down" as redcoats surrender their arms. 7 years of war end with a tune that perfectly captures empire's reversal. Lord Cornwallis claims illness, sending his sword through a subordinate rather than surrender personally to Washington. Even in defeat, empire cannot bear witnessing its own humiliation. News of Yorktown reaches London like a death knell. In Parliament, Lord North declares, "Oh God, it's all over." Sometimes empires die with a whisper, not a roar. The Treaty of Paris, 1783. Britain formally recognizes American independence, signing away half a continent with a quill pen. Ink dries quickly. Empires die slowly, painfully. George Washington resigns his military commission in Annapolis, choosing democracy over dictatorship. King George himself declares if he does this, he will be the greatest man. But what of the tea? The East India Company never recovered. Corporate power that once ruled nations withered like autumn leaves. Some giants die from tiny cuts. Samuel Adams, architect of revolution, lives to see the Constitution ratified. The man who threw tea into Boston Harbor helped birth a nation founded on law, not monarchy. Today, Boston Harbor runs clear. Fish swim where tea leaves once floated. But sometimes on winter nights, locals claim the water still tastes of freedom. The Boston Tea Party Museum displays a replica chest filled with tea from the same regions as 1773. Visitors can touch history, but they cannot undo its consequences. In London, tourists sip tea at the Savoy while reading about American independence. Empires become entertainment. Revolutions become stories. History digests its own tragedies with sugar and cream. But some lessons transcend time. When governments forget they serve the people, when corporations believe they own nations, when power grows deaf to justice, tea still floats. December 16, 1773. A simple act of defiance in a colonial harbor. 3 ships, 342 chests, and the courage to say no to empire. Sometimes revolution begins with tea. Your morning cup connects you to that distant night when ordinary people chose extraordinary courage. Every revolution begins with someone willing to spill the first cup of tyranny.